Very few people seem to know and appreciate the place of the Lord's Supper in the worship of the church. Therefore, for our lessons this week, I would like to call us back to some fundamental principles concerning the Lord's Supper. First, we see that the Lord's Supper is to be considered a divine memorial. God has always had memorials for His people. There were a number of memorials that we read of in the Old Testament, such as the rainbow and the keeping of the Sabbath day. And the purpose of the Lord's Supper is to remind us of the death of Jesus Christ. When the Apostle Paul instructed the Corinthians about the Lord's Supper, he quoted Jesus saying in 1 Corinthians 11 and verse 24, "This do in remembrance of me." And so as we partake of the Lord's Supper, we are to do so with a mindset of remembrance, focusing upon the cross and the sacrifice that Jesus made on our behalf. But secondly, we see that the Lord's Supper was instituted by Jesus. As the Passover was being observed, Jesus took bread and blessed it and brake it, gave it to the disciples and said, "Take, eat, this is my body." And he took the cup and gave thanks and gave it to them, saying, "Drink ye all of it." Matthew 26, verses 26 through 27. It can be easily observed that the Lord's Supper consists of two elements, unleavened bread and the fruit of the vine, just as Paul wrote to the Corinthians about the cup of blessing and the bread which we break in 1 Corinthians 10 and verse 16. These are the only elements that we are authorized to use in our observance of the Lord's Supper. But this was what Jesus instituted, and he did this on the night that he was betrayed, as he sat with his closest friends and his apostles there in that upper room observing the Passover. And he instituted this as a memorial to remember the sacrifice that he was about to offer. But also we see that the Lord's Supper is to be eaten on the first day of the week. We learn by apostolic example that the Lord's Supper is to be partaken of on the first day of every week. And upon the first day of the week, when the disciples came together to break bread, Paul preached unto them, Acts 20 and verse 7. And friends, since every week has a first day, and the first day comes every week, the Lord's Supper should be observed on the first day of every week. Well, if not, why not? Even though there are those among us who may be eating the Lord's Supper at other times than the first day of the week, the silence of the Scriptures will not allow such. The Scriptures dictate for us that we are to partake of the Lord's Supper on the first day of every week. But also we're instructed that the Lord's Supper must be observed in a worthy fashion, and that whenever we partake of the Lord's Supper, that we are to pause. We're to examine our own spiritual condition, and we're to ask ourselves if we are worthy to partake of the Lord's Supper. Paul explained to the Corinthians in 1 Corinthians chapter 11 and verse 27, "Wherefore whosoever shall eat this bread and drink this cup of the Lord unworthily shall be guilty of the body and the blood of the Lord." Now, friends, that is a very serious passage to consider. We are only to partake of the Lord's Supper if we view ourselves as one who has truly been forgiven. We look at ourselves and we see that we are putting our all into our faith. We consider the fact that that is representative of the body and the blood of Jesus Christ. And we are not to take that which is holy and place it within us if we are living lives of unrighteousness. And so as Paul says, that if we partake of the Lord's Supper and we are unworthy to do so, then we shall be guilty of the body and the blood of the Lord. Now, the word unworthily really has to do with the manner in which one eats. Because as we see in 1 Corinthians 11 and verse 29, Paul says that we are to discern the Lord's body. We are to see the significance of what is taking place. And Paul further said, "But let a man examine himself, and let him eat of that bread and drink of that cup." 1 Corinthians 11:28. And there surely is some individuality involved in eating the Lord's Supper. we consider ourselves on an individual level to determine if we're worthy to partake. Friends, we want to thank you for joining us for our program today. We encourage you to continue to join us for our lessons this week as we consider the Lord's Supper, and I pray that God blesses you with a wonderful day.